Hi there, me again, Gemma here. The last video we talked about recognizing the signs, and specifically Jesus is referring to the parable of the fig tree and saying the same way when you look at the fig tree and you see how that its leaves are shooting forth and they're tender and so on, you know that summer is nigh. The same way, when you see all these signs happening, boom, 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 then know that the hour is near, even at the door, and so on. So what we dealt with last time. On this occasion, we're going to be dealing with a couple of things. So this one might be slightly longer. Let me just read from verse 36 to verse 44, and then you see how much we're dealing with here. It says, "But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only." I'm going to deal with that point number one. "But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noe were, so shall also this coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark, and knew not until the flood came, and took them all away, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Then two shall be in the field. Then shall two be in the field, the one shall be taken and the other left. Two women shall be grinding at the mill, the one shall be taken and the other left. Watch therefore, for ye know not what hour your Lord doth come. But know this, that if the good man of the house had known in what watch or what hour the thief would come, he would have watched and would not have suffered his house to be broken up. Therefore be ye also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh." Now, this is not the rapture. Again, I repeat, this is not the rapture. This is talking about the second coming of Christ, which is a different event from the rapture. In the rapture, Jesus does not come to the earth. He stays in the air. We are caught up with him in the air. We meet with the saints who have already died and who have already risen from the dead and met him in the air. And we will meet with him in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. With the second coming of Christ, according to Zechariah, according to Zechariah, as well as Isaiah 61, as well as the book of Revelation, and in particular chapter 19, Jesus comes back. He steps on the Mount of Olives, splits it in two as a result, and he carries out vengeance against the enemies of Israel, and he establishes his kingdom for 1,000 years. The kingdom of David. He sits on his father's throne for 1,000 years. Okay? Now, let's start again from verse 36. It says, "But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only." And to answer this properly, in a sense, we have to go back to the Jewish or the Galilean model of the wedding. Now, in some respects, this kind of has to do with the rapture, but it doesn't. What I mean by that is this. The tribulation period or the final week of Daniel will not start until the church has been taken out. Remember what we said in, I think it was in the very first video, we said that technically speaking, if you could imagine a clock consisting of 70, what do they call those things again? I forget now. But if 70 dials, right? So if we could think about a clock with 70 dials instead of your 60 dials for 60 minutes making an hour, if you could think of a clock consisting of 70 minutes making an hour, right? And each minute of that 70 being a week of years, 7 years each, which is 490 years. What we said in our first video, and I'm just going to go through it very quickly, was that, between the going forth of the command from Artaxerxes to restore and to rebuild Jerusalem and so on was going to be the first 69 weeks of years, or 483 Jewish years. Then there was going to be a gap, and then at the end of the gap, there was going to be another final week. Now, during that gap, and we said at the time that the reason why we don't know how long that gap lasts is because of the mystery of the church, which had been hidden from the foundations of the world, had been hidden in the Old Testament, was never directly mentioned. But in retrospect, we could always go back and see scriptures that kind of alluded to it slightly, but never overtly mentioned it. And that's the reason why Paul speaks about his privilege in Ephesians 3 of being able to reveal the mystery of the church. Now, like I also said before, the harpazo, the rapture of the church is all about the church. Whereas the period of the tribulation is all about Israel and Israel's judgment, but not just Israel's judgment, the turning back of Israel to God. Because remember, during the Messiah's first visitation, Israel did not recognize the Messiah. So going back to the whole business with the church and the rapture of the church, if you look at the way the Jewish model works, the Jewish wedding model, and in particular the Galilean wedding model, it simply works as this. The bridegroom goes to the family of the bride, to the bride and her family, and makes a proposal using a cup of wine. He makes a proposal to the bride to accept his proposal or his offer of marriage. If the bride accepts the offer of marriage, she takes the cup and drinks it, or drinks the wine. If she refuses, then we know that no wedding is happening. If she agrees, on the other hand, then we know there is a commitment now for him to come back and marry the bride. They have a small celebration. Then him and his entourage go back to his father's house. He commences building an extension for his wife. When the father deems that extension ready, he then says to the son, "Now, son, go get your bride." And this is what Jesus was alluding to in John chapter 14 in verses 1 down to about verse 3, verse 4, thereabouts, where he said, you believe in God. It says, "Let not your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many mansions, there are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. Behold, I go to prepare a place for you, that where I am, you may be also." Where I am, you may be also. Now, so if Jesus is saying that we are his bride, according to Ephesians 5, around verse 27 and so on, as well as Revelation chapter 19, the early parts, which shows Jesus is coming from a wedding. At the time he is returning back to earth, he's coming from a wedding, which I believe is the wedding to us, his bride. Then what happens is that because the Father only knows the day when the church, when Yeshua is supposed to come and take his bride, number one, and because the period of the tribulation cannot start until the bride is gone. Remember, God puts the batteries back in the clock only after the church is gone. This is the reason why, even up till now, it says, "But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels in heaven, but my Father only." That still applies. Now, I'll be honest with you, for a while I used to think that the reason why Jesus would know now is because Jesus has gone back and is now sitting at the right hand of the Father as God himself and so on. But even though he has gone back, and this is what occurred to me later when I began to understand the Galilean wedding model, even though he has gone back and is now seated at the right hand of the Father, the truth of the matter is that he's still the Son. He has not all of a sudden stopped being the Son. He is still the Son, which means at some stage the Father is going to say, "Go get your bride." Now, what that means is this. If we don't know the day the church gets taken out, then that means we don't know the day the tribulation period starts. If we don't know the day the tribulation period starts, we don't know what period to add 7 years to in order to know when the end will be. And that's what the Bible is saying in verse 36. So that's that done. Now in verse 37 it says, "But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark." In other words, until that day, Noah was a conspiracy theorist. Nobody believed him. He was building a boat on land when it had never rained before, and he was saying a flood was going to take place. Nobody believed him, and as a result of that, the only people who were in the ark, apart from the animals, was Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their 3 wives. Okay? And then he says in verse 39, "They knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be." Now here's the reason why I'm reading this, because in some respects the statement in verses 40 to 42 is explained in the previous verses. So in verses 40 to 42, which is the other thing that confuses people and people assume that's the rapture, is a part that says, "Then shall 2 be in the field. The one shall be taken and the other left behind," or the other left. 2 women shall be grinding at the mill. The one shall be taken and the other left. Watch therefore, for you know not what hour your Lord doth come. Okay? And then he says, but know this, that if the good man of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched and would have not suffered his house to be broken up. Therefore be ye also ready, for such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh. Now go back to verse 39. It says, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. So let's think about the word take and took. The word took is past tense of take. So we know that the same sense in which Matthew is using the word took is the same sense he's using the word take. Now, in our traditional view of verses 40 to 42, we assume taken means to be raptured away. Now, apart from the fact that it's a different Greek word altogether as used for the harpazo in 1 Thessalonians 4, verses 17 to 18, here it uses, so the word for the rapture used in 1 Thessalonians 4 is the word harpazo, which translated into Latin is where we get the word rapio, from where we get the word rapture and raptured and so on in English. Okay, so that's just a quick plug for those who say the word rapture is not in the Bible. It is, except that it's slightly different. Okay, now on the flip side here, what we see, the word taken is the word paralambano, which kind of sounds like some South American word, not a Greek word. But paralambano simply means to be taken, but in particular in somewhat unfortunate circumstances. And if you look at verse 39, that's kind of what it's alluding to. Look at, in fact, let's read from verse 38, or no, even better from verse 37, because this is very important, and it's very important you understand this. But as the days of Noah were, or as we say, as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. So, as we found with the days of Noah, so it will be with the coming of the Son of Man. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came, and took them all away. The Bible is not saying the boat took them away, in which case it would have been referring to Lot and his family. The Bible is talking about those who were outside the boat being taken away by the flood. In other words, being taken there was not a good thing. It was actually a bad thing. It says, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Then shall two be in the field. The one shall be taken and the other left. Two women shall be grinding at the mill. The one shall be taken and the other left. For many years, I've been a Christian for a good number of years now. For many years, I genuinely believed that Matthew 24, verses 40 to 42 was referring to the rapture. And then I began to understand Daniel chapter 9, verses 24 to 27. And then began to understand that Matthew 24 surely must be referring to the tribulation period. And then I started to question, does that mean then that there's a post-tribulation rapture? That there's some sort of mid-tribulation rapture? Because Matthew 24 verses 40 to 42, if it's talking about a rapture, it's certainly not talking about a pre-tribulation rapture. Because during this period that Jesus is describing here in Matthew 24, we are in the tribulation, or somebody is in the tribulation. But because of my understanding of Daniel 9, I started to ask questions. So I then started to search the scriptures more intently. And then I found something very interesting in Zechariah chapter 13, verses 8 and 9, the last two verses. And it says, and it shall come to pass that in the land, saith the Lord, 2 parts therein shall be cut off and die. In other words, 2/3 of the people in Israel during that period of the Great Tribulation will die. They will be killed in many different ways. By war, by pestilence, by famine, by just plain execution. Many people are going to die in Israel during that period. That's apart from the folks who are going to die in the rest of the world. But the Bible makes it clear to us that 2/3 of the population of Israel, according to Zechariah chapter 13 verse 8, will die. It says, but the third shall be left therein. In other words, there will be another third that will be alive. So if we think about the population of Israel today, if it's somewhere around the population of today's Israel during that period of the Great Tribulation, then somewhere in the region of about 6 million people are going to die. Okay? And then it says, and I will bring the third part through the flood, or through the fire, sorry. And I will refine them as silver is refined, and will try them as gold is tried. They shall call on my name, and I will hear them. I will say, it is my people, and they shall say, the Lord is my God. I've kind of explained this part in verse 9 before, how that, you know, it is when the Jews, now recognizing that they have believed in the false Messiah, recognizing that they missed out on the first true Messiah the first time, will now in repentance call for Yeshua, Jesus Christ, to come and rescue them, because now they know that Yeshua is the real Messiah, and because he hears their cries, according to Exodus 3, God heard their cries when they were in Egypt. The same way he's going to hear their cries during that period, and then he's going to come back and rescue them. But then in chapter 14, in verse 1, it says, behold, the day of the Lord cometh, and thy spoil shall be divided in the midst of thee. For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken. Now listen to this. The city shall be taken. That does not give the impression of a good thing. That is not giving the impression of a rapture of the city. It's saying the city shall be taken, gives the impression of the city being captured. And the houses rifled, and the women ravished. Now it's sad that the Bible is saying this, but this is actually going to happen. Now, if you have Jewish friends, they need to pay attention to this now, get born again now, so that they can escape these things, because these things are going to happen. There is nothing going to stop it other than time. Time is the only thing that is preventing those things from happening now, but they are eventually going to happen. It says, for I will gather nations, verse 2 of chapter 14, Zechariah 14, I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle. People are probably wondering, how will God do that? Well, consider this. Isaiah chapter 53 verse 10 tells us that it pleased God to bruise his son, Jesus Christ, on the cross. You know, all this time that people have been confused about, or have been arguing, you know, who killed Jesus Christ? Was it the Jews? And when you say it was the Jews, people say you're an anti-Semite, you're anti-Semitic and so on. Some others say, oh, it was the Romans, not Herod, Pontius Pilate and his cronies. The truth of the matter is that it was God that slaughtered Jesus on the cross, following the same model as it did with Abraham, telling Abraham to go take his son and to kill him. And of course, you know the story. He provided the lamb or the ram that was used to replace his son as a substitute, and so on and so forth. There's some very interesting things there. Anyway, so it says, for I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, and the women ravished, and half of the city shall go forth into captivity. One will be taken, one will be captured, one will go into captivity, and the residue of the people, half of the people, shall not be cut off from the city. One half will be taken, one half left. And that's all the Bible is trying to say in verses 40 to 42. It's not talking about the rapture. It's talking about an unpleasant thing that will happen to the Jews. After 2/3 of the Jews are killed, one half of the remaining third, which is 1/6 of the total original population, will be taken into captivity. The remnant that will be left in the land is a 1/6, the half of the third, 1/6 that will be left in the land. It is these ones, along with the ones who are scattered in the dispersion around the world, that will call for Yeshua to come back. And he will come back for them. And that's kind of what we talked about yesterday. When he comes back, he's going to send the angels. The angels are going to go around the world and gather all the Jews from wherever they are. They're not going to use an airline. They're going to go supernaturally. I don't know how it's going to happen, but it is going to happen. God is going to send the angels to gather them from wherever they are and bring them back into the land, because the kingdom of his son is about to start. And so in verse 43 he says, but know this, that if the good man of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched and would not have suffered his house to be broken up. Therefore be ye also ready. Therefore be ye also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh. I'll stop there for this part. Just understand this. Verses 40 to 42 is not speaking about the rapture. It's speaking about the captivity, the capturing of half of the remnant in Israel, whereas 2/3 would have already been killed prior to then. Sorry, it's not great news. Sorry, it's not particularly pleasant. But listen, it is what it is. This is what the scripture says, which is why I keep saying the best time to be saved, the best time for anyone to be saved is now. Now, while the ark's door is still open, now, while we can still go to heaven the easy way by believing in Lord Jesus and not having to experience the travails of the Great Tribulation. Remember what I also said before. The Great Tribulation is more than just persecution. For those who think I'm just trying to escape persecution, no, it's not that. Persecution is real. We're going to experience it. I've experienced it before. I'm probably going to experience it again before I leave this world. But the period of the Great Tribulation is more than just persecution. It's a time of intense trouble that men have never seen before. You don't want to experience its horrors. You don't want your worst enemy to experience its horrors. So the best time to be saved is now. If you are saved, thank God for you. If you are not sure, get saved or rededicate your life to the Lord. And if you are not saved, definitely get saved. God bless you. I'll speak to you soon.